Hello, I'm Franz Spohn, and I'm here today to introduce you to Faber-Castell's water-soluble graphite pencils. These come in HB, 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B, 5 pencils grades all together. The way that these pencils are made, they use high-quality cedar. They groove them out, they put the graphite in, and what's really important to mention here is they have what is called SV bonding, which essentially means that when they put the pencil sandwiches together, they're glued along the entire length of the graphite. Other pencils are spot glued, so every once in a while they'll have some glue, and if you inevitably drop a pencil, you can break the graphite. And if you have a pencil that is spot glued, you're going to lose all the graphite until you get to the next glue spot. But with the SV bonding, they're glued along the whole edge, and so that it really minimizes what happens if you accidentally drop a pencil. Okay. Now, in terms of the B rating and the numbers, an 8B pencil is the softest. That means that when you draw with this, you're going to get a very, very soft range. And just very quickly about holding a pencil, I generally hold it a little farther back, and then that kind of enables me to have a lot more control on how much graphite gets put down on the paper. So if I let the weight of the pencil direct how much graphite is being on the pencil, I can get a very light tone, and if I add a little pressure, then I can get it dark. So you can get a full range of tones with each of the pencils. The HB pencil is a little softer. The HB pencil is harder, and so that you can see immediately that it puts much less graphite down. And as I bear down on it, that's about as dark as I can get. Now these are water soluble, so that they make a good drawing pencil regardless. But the magic, though, is in their being water soluble. So this is a water brush. It has an area that this unscrews, you put water in it, then as you squeeze it, water will come through the point. Or with each set, if you buy a set of the pencils, you get a more traditional brush. So as soon as I put water on that, you can see that it immediately releases the graphite. Okay. And then with HB, which put less down, I get a much lighter tone. So in the example that I have here, where I wanted lighter tones, I put a little less graphite down. Where I wanted really dramatic, deep, dark shadows, I used the 8B to put quite a bit. So just as kind of a quick example, this is an HB. And I can put a little bit of that down there. And then I'll come back with a 8B, go on top of it. They blend them together a little bit. And then I take my water brush. I usually kind of work from light to dark. So I'll get it going with the water. The brush a little bit, come back again, get the rest of it. So it gives me a nice tonal range from light to dark. Now the paper that I'm using is a watercolor paper, and it's a hot press. So the surface is fairly neutral, and that's how I can get these kind of really unbroken continuous tone. You can choose to use a cold press watercolor paper, which is very textured, and so you can get a more kind of traditional watercolor effect. It just depends on what your drawing or illustration or painting style might be. Now, compared to the Castell 9000, which is a traditional graphite pencil, you can probably see a little bit better by example. This is a piece that I did with a Graphite 9000, and you can see that I can build up rich blacks, but the tones in the water-soluble graphite are much silkier, a little creamier, and certainly much more intense. Part of that is that with the liberation of the graphite with water, it really soaks into the paper. And so with your more traditional graphite pencil, you have some of the grain of the pencil of the paper. With the more traditional pencil drawing with a Graphite 9000, you have some of the surface of the paper still. No, that's not right either. With the Graphite 9000, a more traditional graphite pencil, the tooth of the paper plays a part in it, where you're putting graphite on the top surface and the bottom part of the grain is not saturated by the graphite unless you really bear down on it. With the water-soluble graphite, it really is absorbed by the paper. Now, with most watercolor paper, it has sizing, and it's generally 100% rag, and both of those qualities are really good. The sizing of the paper protects the fibers of the paper from absorbing something too quickly. It's almost like kind of a first line of protection, so that as I'm putting anything down on that, as long as I don't damage, use too much pressure or use too sharp of a point, then I can erase that. We have several different types of erasers. You can use a kneaded eraser that is a little bit sticky, and if you just kind of press it instead of rubbing it, if you press it down, the stickiness of the eraser will pick up the graphite, and you can do very subtle alterations, or you can press a little bit harder and remove it entirely. The vinyl eraser is a little bit more dramatic, and with a little bit of pressure, it's much more efficient to just get rid of your marks altogether. All right, so let's put this back. Okay, this is the water-soluble graphite pencil. Now, when I add water to that with my brush, okay, that hasn't quite been absorbed entirely by the fibers of the paper because of the sizing. So if I want to move that around a little bit, if I want to pick some of it up, I can. And then if I have a cloth, which I happen to have here, I can blot that and I can pick some of that up because the sizing of the paper has prevented it from being fully absorbed by the fibers of the paper. So there's a lot that you can do with the watercolor paper that's been sized. You can take advantage of things like just putting a pool of water there. Now, the one thing you do not want to do with these pencils is put them directly into water. And this is my little water cup. So don't ever put them in there. What happens is that the moisture will wick up into the barrel and will totally destroy the graphite. It'll make it real crumbly, and it'll also start affecting the wood, and the wood will start separating from the graphite. So, but instead, if you want, you could take your brush, and then you can add it, or in this case, I've got a pool of water here, and on a separate part of your paper, on a scrap piece of paper, I can make like a little graphite, water graphite pan here. I can take my pen or my brush, my water brush, and I can pick that up, and I can do that. So if I want to add some extra into there, and then if I want to, I can take a lot there and just kind of drop it in there. You can see the sizing of the paper keeps that water from being absorbed, and so it's like a puddle. You can see the surface tension of that water, and I can move it around to get some real interesting washes. But again, don't take your pencils and put them directly in your water. Now, when that dries, then you'll get that kind of reticulation of the graphite patterns onto the paper, and you might be able to get some very nice effects using it that way. So whether you draw directly on the surface with the pencil, again, the HB is the lightest, and there's a 2B, a 4B, a 6B. Hamlet used 2B pencils a lot. 2B or not 2B. So you can get a full rich black, you can get a light gray, you can make a little working pad. You could also do that with the HB, so you have a light gray. You can make washes, you can do accommodations. The thing that I like about these too is that if I'm drawing, I do a lot of characters. I can come through and get some really nice gray washes that work with it. You can also use these water-soluble crayons in conjunction with the Castell, the graphite. These are not water-soluble. So if I would turn this around, if I to me, he's standing on his head. To you, I'll give him a little hat. Hat's on. Okay. Now, when I apply the water-soluble graphite onto that, it's not going to affect the line because the standard graphite is not water-soluble. So even if I get real exuberant with my value here, it's not going to destroy that line. So that can be a very nice effect too. So you can use both pencils together in a resist. This is a resist method. In other words, that the graphite, standard graphite, will resist being obliterated by water. So there's a very large range of effects that you can get. You can get washes, you can do more rendered things, you can do characters, you can play the two pencils together, the graphite and the water-soluble graphite, and generally have an excellent time.